Cool. You're instantiating item objects from this item class to kind of represent these items that we're dealing with. And so in these classes, we've defined these items, we've defined methods, and we use these methods to kind of report back state and add some behavior. And so far what we've done is that we've created a class, we've defined it using initialize or other methods. We can have instance variables that store state. We use new to create a new instance of an object, and then we can kind of use these anywhere we fit. And like this is something we've been doing for, what week is it? It's week 4. So nearly 4.5 weeks now, we're kind of getting used to this pattern. Right. And the thing is, can we step back, is that in Ruby, classes are also objects, and we can use methods on full class definitions the same way we can call them on instances of that class, like for example, new. And what separates an instance method from a class method is how we define them, right? And we kind of use that with self. So what we're going to do is that I'm going to break you into these breakout rooms. I'm going to post a thing in your Slack channel. And you're just going to kind of like poke at this and like kind of come to a kind of educated guess about how things work. Okay, that's there. So again, the instructions here is that I posted a thing in your Slack channel. We want to look at the social media user class, and we want to think about what we want each method to return and why. We're going to take about 15 minutes to do this. And if we have time, pseudocode what do you think should go in each method. Don't write actual code, just kind of like pseudocode, like, hey, I want this method to do this in this kind of fashion. We're not looking for actual code. Okay, so I'm going to break you out into groups. And we'll give you 15 minutes. Cool. And off you go. Dun, dun, dun. Just making sure, because I can't tell if there's everyone's back here on the screen or not. Bear with me. Cool. Let's get some thoughts. Jack, can you share us what your some thoughts from what you discussed in your breakout group?
Yes. So we were, I guess, most confused by the most popular one, but we were pretty confident that the rating method would kind of function like an adder reader does and just return rating. And that add post would possibly like add a post into a collection of posts, and return the post that we input for that variable. And then we also thought similarly for find I would be similar to an adder reader, but we weren't sure about that one because it is called differently.
So what do you think are the differences between the two methods that have self stuck to the front of it and the ones that do not? What do you say is like the defining, like kind of like something that stands out to you that's kind of like different between that and the other ones?
So I think methods that have self in front of them can be called without an instance created of the class.
Yes, but like I guess my question, let me rephrase my question, is like what makes, other than the fact that they have self in front, what are they doing? What do they appear to be doing that seems to be a little different?
That is kind of where I'm confused.
So like for rating, how many things is it dealing with? And for add
Just
post, how many posts, right?
Yeah, so just the one.
And so a thing is like, so what we could say that like, what's different about most popular and find?
I guess maybe it could search through more than one instance.
Mhm. Right. And that is one kind of distinction here about what is the difference in what these things are doing. Well, that's great. So with that in mind, let's take a Pomodoro break. See you back at 9:30. And at 9:30, we're going to talk about some syntax and like how this could potentially work. So let's be back at 9:30. Hello, we're back. Is everyone eating cereal? It just feels like everyone's eating cereal. um, I'm bad when it comes to breakfast. All right. So let us kind of talk about class methods and how they kind of work in reality. Can everyone see my screen / hear me? Cool. All right, so let's just make a file. I'll call greeter.rb. And we're going to open up here. And we're just going to show a very, very kind of basic example of how we define and use a class method. So what I'm going to do is I want to make a class called greeter. And then we're going to do def self.say hello. Oops. It's going to do a puts. Good morning. Exhibiting the energy that I wish I had right now, which I do not. Code should be aspirational. So what we can do is that if we want this to run, we could do a greeter.say hello. And when I run this, we can see that it prints out to the screen, good morning, right? The big difference here that you may probably have noticed from the way we've been doing things previously is that we haven't created an instance of this class, right? We in no place anywhere do we do this. The good old fashioned greeter equals greeter.new, right? We did none of that happened, right? And so it's like, all right, why bother? Why not just like have the same pattern? And big picture reason why is that sometimes there is functionality that we want to give a class in whole as opposed to a specific instances of class, right? One thing we could potentially do is use a class to track information about every single instance of a class. For example, this example that we talked about previously with social media user, like what if we were to use the social media user class to keep track of all social media users, right? Don't do that now. This is just something we want to show you so it's not a completely foreign concept when we get to using active record a little later on. Other things that we can do is that we can actually make a class be in charge of creating instances of itself, right? And so what we can do here is, let's do this. Let's make a file, user file, cool. And we're just make a user class. It's gonna be straightforward, user, def, oops. Cool. Add a reader name. And what we can do is that we can create a class method to create a bunch of users, right? If we were to make a bunch of users right now, we could do something like, let's say if we had, let me copy and paste from the, we had this, what if we had this? And we could do something like, all right, I guess users dot each do user data, user dot new, and could pass in name, sorry, user data name, right? And we could just set this equal to, and this here, because it's map, it returns a new collection of user objects. Anyone have any questions about what I've done here with this code sitting outside of the class? Normally, I would put this code somewhere else outside the user class in like a runner file, but I just want to keep it all together so we just look at it and be all in the same place. Anyone have any questions about what I'm doing here? How I have a collection of hashes inside an array, and I'm just iterating through and I'm creating these user objects. Sarah?
Why in the user.new user_data and then in the square brackets you have name? Why did you use colon name?
Because I've set that here.
Okay, and it has to be colon name in order to access that.
Yep, because
Okay.
you're using a symbol there. It's using the symbol syntax. Yep.
Okay, and is accessing that key?
The value. The key is name.
So that it'll return the value of that key.
Yeah, so each time what I'm doing is every single time I'm going through, I'm creating a new user with the name of whatever the value is.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions about what I've done here? Right, and you probably are doing something pretty similar to this in your projects. Like you're iterating through a thing and it's giving you these things, and that's one potential way we could do this. A different way we could do this is by using a class method. And what we can do is that we can kind of like, I'm not a huge fan of like just having logic just sit like out in nowhere in the middle of the class, in the middle of like outside, like in a runner file. We generally want to hand things off and organize things a little better by using classes. So what I would do is something like this. I'll create this class method called self.create multiple. And I would pass in users. Whoops. And what I would do is that users dot map to user data user.new, pass in user name. Now, instead of having this sit out here, I would do, user dot create multiple users. I'm passing in this array of hashes into this class method in order to let that do the thing. And this does the same thing because what this class method does is that it's just going to shoot us back an array of these new user objects. Richard?
Yeah, this is just kind of a quick clarification for using for a class being responsible for making instances of itself. Is that something you generally see out in the wild? Or is that something that you would have separate? Because we did this with our battleship, where we had our ship class return an instance of a ship. But I was told that it would probably be best to have like a shipyard or a ship factory class that would return.
Yeah, I think it's situational. Like you could do it either way. Like I see the argument in Battleship in particular. I would probably have like a shipyard object. What we're trying to do here is that we're trying to kind of show you that this is one potential use of class methods, and it's something you'll see a little later on. We want to like, we're seeding information so we have a good knowledge plant later on.
Right. So you're just demonstrating the class methods.
Okay. And I think that, yeah, but at the same time, I think that this is definitely a pattern that is used and pretty frequently.
Yeah, I guess you'd call it a factory method, right? Or something like that.
Sure.
Okay.
But like it's just creating instances of itself. Cool. Questions about what I have done, like move that logic from outside of the class into the class using a class method. Mattia? You are muted.
Sorry.
That's right.
I guess like what I still don't understand is like, why put the self there? Why not just have create multiple users? Like it would do the exact same thing either way, it seems.
Yeah, because you are not instantiating a user object, and there's no need to instantiate a user object in that case if you're just creating other users. That is kind of like saying like, hey, to make if this was not a class method, we're essentially saying we need to have a user in order to make other users, in order to make many users, which feels like a dependency that shouldn't exist.
I guess I'm just trying to think of like, when would you ever not instantiate?
It's an organizational thing. Is that a user class should have the ability to create multiple aspects of itself as opposed to like instantiating one to do it.
So, I mean, to put this into like a real life concept that would like, maybe make sense is like, obviously this is something that's like directly applicable to Black Thursday. But like, is this something where you'd say like, don't make an item repo, put this inside, or like, don't make an item, put this, like, I don't understand like where this actually would go in like reality to be useful.
You're not gonna see this like a real world very real world tangible use for it in module 1. You'll see it next module of like how this would actually use something like this. There is one piece of this that is required in Black Thursday, but it is a little contrived because it's just us trying to show you like, hey, this is something you're going to see. You should get used to this pattern.
Okay, but it's not like actually adding any benefit to the project.
Organization. It is organizationally beneficial, right? Because instead of having a thing be responsible for creation, like let's pull that in here because it feels like a thing should also have this ability to create itself.
Okay.
Rather than having that code sit somewhere else. Yep. Regina?
Is there any way you can show me what this might look like if you were to have more than just a name? So like, can you add in like age or something?
Yeah, sure. Let's do. He's gonna hit me when I do this, but he's not here. I don't know how old Brian is. I also don't know how Megan is, but we're gonna err on the side of not going the other direction. You don't ask people's ages. That is a faux pas. So that's the same thing. And what I would do is that, let's say for username, if I were to do this, I would change this a little bit. And one more thing to change. Like that. Did I miss anything? I think I got everything. Yep. Like this.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, honestly, if it was just a name, it's probably better to do it this way to start with. Like just if we pretend like this didn't exist. Oops, nope, that is the wrong button. Pretend like this didn't exist. This is probably the better pattern for it. But fine. Cool. All right. Next up is that we are going to have you some questions I'd like you to answer in your notebook. Also / kind of experiment with. And I'm going to put this again in your Slack channel and move this and move you back to your groups. We'll take until 10 o'clock. And off you go. All right, I think everyone is back. So as we kind of wrap this up, I want to open up to questions that people may have to clarify. Questions about class methods. Jameson?
Yeah, so we found out that you can't do an instance method inside of a class method.
Mm-hmm.
So if we wanted to do like a helper method that assists the class method, should that helper method be a class method?
Yes, well, it has to. Right, because otherwise you don't have an access to it, right? You have to do the thing. I would kind of avoid doing that because then you start getting to the circular kind of like you start going in circles, and that could be potentially confusing / just trouble, right? Like I think another example, I think class methods are also something that we could potentially use in lieu of other tools to kind of share code, right? Like anytime you have a collection of code that where you do not depend on state, you could just have a class that has just a bunch of class methods in it and use that as like a thing. I think that's something that you could use for this project, like a lot of your math stuff. Why not have like a math kind of class that has all the math stuff you might want to call from you can reuse.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Lawrence?
So when in a class method, you call an instance method on an instance, is that different question than what the one was asked?
It is a different question. The issue is of scope in that like you can't just refer to an instance of something else inside your class method. You're gonna have to pass it you're gonna have to pass the instance who has access to it.
Okay.
So it is possible, but there's some extra hoops you got to jump through. Gunnar?
Yeah, so as like a broad overview, can I generalize and say like class methods are something that's done on every single instance of a class, while like an instance method, or yeah, a class method is done on every single instance of that class. And an instance method is something that's like optional that we can use on the said class.
It's the required part I'm a little fuzzy about because like you could like with anything, right? You could set up a class method for something and just never use it. Right. So like that required part, I'm like, I would say yes, it is a part of it's not a part of every class because it's part of the class, the blueprint, right? And so like to say that it kind of affects everything is kind of like it's I don't think that's quite the right word. I see what you're saying. But like, let's take a step back. When we were talking with like just the class, we're talking about purely the blueprint and not really every single thing. But they can be used in certain ways that you'll see to kind of like look through all the things.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. That is it for class methods. Let's take a break. We've been at this for a while, so let's come back at 10:15. 10:15. We'll take 10.